Watch Indonesia arbeitet eng mit Partnern und Partnerinnen in Indonesien und Europa zusammen, um auf drängende soziale, politische und ökologische Probleme aufmerksam zu machen. Heute geht es um das Projekt Partnerschaften für Energiewende und Klima, Perspektiven aus zivilgesellschaftlicher Sicht und Ansätze für eine soziale und globale Gerechtigkeit. Der Fokus liegt auf Indonesien. Das Projekt untersucht, wie die Energiewende in Indonesien sozial inklusiv, ökologisch sinnvoll und global gerecht gestaltet werden kann.
Highlights the global interconnectedness of the energy transition and aims to foster cooperation and solidarity between civil societies in the global south and in the global north. And this project is supported by Engagement Global with funding from the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, the Stiftung Nord-Süd-Brücken with funds from the Berlin Senate Office for Development Cooperation, and Brot für die Welt with funds from the Church Development Service. And before we dive deeper into today's topic, we'd actually like to start with a short interactive poll with you. So please join us on Mentimeter. You'll find a link in the chat in a minute. So while people are joining, I'll briefly introduce what this poll is about. So it in total comprises 4 questions. Just feel free to answer the questions spontaneously because there's actually no right or wrong answers. And the first question that we'd like to get your perspective on is, which of the following are examples of green energy in your opinion? Oh, can we go back to the previous slide, Janti? Thank you. I'll just give you another seconds for the last people to still participate. So let's already start looking into the results. So what we see is that most of you actually identified solar energy as an example of green energy, whereas for the other energy sources, the opinions are more divided, with actually no one identifying hydropower or geothermal as a green form of energy. That's actually quite interesting, and we'll come back to that later also during today's webinar. So let's, for now, switch to the second question. What comes to your mind when you hear about the energy transition? Great. Thank you very much for all the responses. So we see that responses are actually quite diverse, with some more focusing on the technical parts, like net zero emission or shifting to sustainable energy forms. But we already see that you are also already aware that it's also a social problem. Climate justice is an important term that also sets the tone for today's discussion, and also the discrepancy between global north and global south. Cool. So question number 3. What do you think is required to promote a socially and ecologically just energy transition? Thank you very much again for participating. We see a lot of thoughtful replies here, so please just keep them in mind for the later discussion. Many of you already mentioned that participation, multi-stakeholder involvement is an important point. Budget, of course, is important. And yes, we also have a point on safeguards, for example, that we'll come back to later on. Cool. And coming to our last question of the poll, what do you think are challenges for a social and ecologically just energy transition now specifically in Indonesia? Thank you again for participating. I'm gonna quickly summarize. So I see that many of you already mentioned economical and political interests that undermine the just energy transition, or financial issues such as, for example, debt increasing. So also again, keep those points in mind because they're gonna be important for later discussion. So all these 4 questions that we just asked you is exactly what today's webinar is about. So we will explore the challenges of a just energy transition in Indonesia, and we will discuss how they can be overcome. So I think we all agree that phasing out from fossil fuels is a key pillar of climate protection. And Indonesia actually plays an important role in this process as it's the largest emitter of greenhouse gases in Southeast Asia. And in addition, Indonesia plays a crucial role in global clean tech supply chains as a key supplier of resources such as nickel and tin, which are, for example, essential in e-mobility and in energy storage. And to give you some background, in 2022, Indonesia has signed a Just Energy Transition Partnership. I'm going to use the term JETP in the following to refer to that. And the declared goal of the Indonesian JETP is to increase the share of renewables to about 1/3 by 2030 and to reach net zero emissions in the power sector by 2050. And the JETP is an agreement, basically a financial agreement to mobilize $20 billion in public and private financing to support this just energy transition in Indonesia. But what is actually Indonesia's current progress in expanding its renewable energies? And what are key shortcomings of the Just Energy Transition Partnership? So how just and effective is it truly? And what are shortcomings of the initiative? How can the JETP be implemented more equitably and effectively, for example? So we're fortunate to be joined today by a diverse panel of speakers who will help us answer all these questions. We will start the webinar with 3 presentations. And after the presentations, we're going to have a question and answering session, but you can already feel free to post your questions in the chat at any time during the presentations. And also, if you prefer to post questions in Indonesian language, that's no problem at all. Just, put them in the chat as well, and we will translate them. So with that, let's dive in. And I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Anna Fünfgeld. Anna earned her PhD in political science from the University of Freiburg, and she is currently a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Hamburg. There, she is part of the Cluster of Excellence Climate, Climatic Change and Society, CLICS, and an associate fellow at the German Institute of Global and Area Studies, GIGA. And her research focuses on energy and climate politics, with a particular emphasis on climate and energy justice in Indonesia and beyond. So as an expert in identifying both the potential and the barriers to socio-ecological energy transition, she will share valuable insights into where Indonesia currently stands in expanding renewable energy. So please go ahead, Anna.
Okay, thank you very much, Sylvia. Thanks also, Janti, for the invitation to join you here. I have a presentation, actually. Can I just share it? Okay. Okay, can you see it? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Or maybe, yeah, okay, I just leave it there. So, also Selamat Malam di Indonesia. And hi to everyone in Germany and Indonesia and other parts of the world. I was asked to hold a presentation about just energy transitions and Indonesia, where Indonesia currently stands, and I decided to, I will present a little bit on that, but then also I think we should speak about the barriers to a just energy transition in Indonesia that, in my opinion, lie within the country, but also beyond in international power relations. So let's first take a look at where Indonesia stands at the moment, like especially in the electricity sector. That's what I want to focus on. So in Indonesia, that's the latest source from the International Energy Agency. Electricity generation is still dominated by fossil fuels. Fossil fuels make up more than 80% of electricity generation in Indonesia, and obviously by far biggest part comes from coal. The latest number I found from last year is 62%. In 2019, it was 59%. So we can see there's a relative growth in coal even. With renewables currently make up around 17% of electricity generation in Indonesia. But what needs to be said, and I think you can also see that from the slide, most of these
Anna,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. I think so we're still seeing just your PowerPoint, but not the presentation mode, so we can't see on which slide you currently are.
Oh, I started the presentation mode.
Yeah, can you maybe
let me do you see anything now or no? No, okay.
No, you're not sharing, no.
Okay, I actually started the presentation mode, but somehow I will try to shift it to the other screen. Just give me a second.
Perfect, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think now it works.
Presentation mode? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
But now I can't switch it. Ah, doch, okay. Okay, so now you should see the second slide. Is that correct?
Yes, it works.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so now here you see the visualization of the electricity generation in Indonesia. Currently, the current numbers, as I have just said, like most of electricity generation is based on coal. A smaller part is renewables. That's currently around 17%. But as you can see, what needs to be considered is that it is mainly large-scale hydro and geothermal power, which makes up this bigger share of renewables. You see solar and wind are mentioned here with 0%. It's not zero, but it's below 1%. That's why it's 0% in this slide. So both of them remains below 1%. Okay. On this slide, you can also see that overall electricity demand and therefore also electricity production have been growing over the last years. Not also renewables, but proportionally, coal has been even growing more than renewables and fossil fuels in general. I think that's what you can see from this slide. And that's important because, in fact, we have an absolute growth of renewable energies and also of solar and wind, as you can see from this slide. But in relative shares, it remains quite low. So these are the relative numbers. There you can see how coal has even slightly increased over the last years. And solar and wind, in case you cannot identify that, remain close to 0% of electricity production in Indonesia. And like the only ones that have been slightly growing, for example, like hydropower or geothermal power. in terms of what is considered renewable. We had this question before, so can be also contested. But yeah, this in a generally would be considered under renewables. What is also important to mention is that we still have very unequal electricity access over the archipelago. And there has been like official electrification rates have been quite positive. So officially, electrification rates have reached nearly 100%, but actually there remains a lack of suitable power grids. And also, like many people, for example, may have access to electricity, but then this does not mean they will have access to electricity 24 hours a day. And then there are also some problems with numbering. So maybe that's something we should keep in mind also when we think about energy justice and a just transition, that electricity access still also, it may seem to be an issue that is already resolved, is not completely resolved in Indonesia, and that especially counts for the eastern islands and remote areas. So, but at the same time, there are some plans towards an energy transition in Indonesia. For example, there is a renewable energy target. It was originally by 23% in 2025. Now, this was the National Energy Strategy. Now in the JETP, Comprehensive Investment and Policy Plan. So that's the implementation roadmap for the JETP. This has been raised, so it's now by 34% by 2030. That's the current goal of renewable energy. So you see, we're still quite far away with around 70% at the moment. Indonesia has also submitted its nationally determined contribution. So that are the emission reduction targets all the countries submit to the UNFCCC as part of the Paris Agreement. This is the latest NDC targets of Indonesia. The newest one is still missing. They should submit something until September for this round. The latest NDC targets have been criticized by Climate Action Tracker as critically insufficient. So that's actually the lowest rate in Climate Action Tracker's assessment. Currently, the reduction that is foreseen is a reduction of emissions by 32% unconditionally and 43% conditionally until 2030. But what needs to be mentioned here is that 60% of this emission reduction shall come from forestry. So it's a much smaller part that shall come from electricity, and that's, I think, something that is remarkable here. Indonesia has also net zero target. And as Sylvia correctly said, this is now by 2050. So they changed the target. It was originally 2060. So that new target is an outcome of the JETP. And Indonesia also announced the coal phase out. I think PLN first announced that in May 2021 prior to the COP. And it said that it would start retiring coal power plants to reach a complete phase out from coal by 2055. So that's on the planning stage. There has been a lot of criticism already back then because actually the power plants that were selected for being phased out were either the ones that shouldn't have been built anymore anyway because of a miscalculation of electricity demand, or what it also mentioned, this plan was a phase out from quite old coal power plants. What is also to be mentioned and what we will also hear about more in a following presentation by Bima is obviously the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which is interesting because it stimulated, I would say, an energy transition debate in Indonesia, but at the same time, it has some crucial gaps. I think we will speak about later on as well. Now, I briefly want to explain you a little bit where this coal dependency from Indonesia, like where this comes from, and like introduce a little bit to the historical background of this. So coal in Indonesia is actually the primary electricity source only since around 20 years, and the coal mining boom commenced around 15 years ago. It was initially, especially because of favorable export prices. So this was the time of the commodities, like of a global commodities boom. It was the time when there was especially a growing demand by China, also South Korea, but mainly China was like the biggest, or is still the biggest export market for Indonesian coal. And at the same time, so when this commodity boom happened, at the same time, Indonesia had already implemented its decentralization reforms and issued a new mining law in 2009. And like these conditions together led to an excessive granting of mining licenses, especially like on the local level, because in that time, this has been changed now, but in that time, mining licenses were granted either by the Bupati, so the district head, or the municipality head. And in this practice, obviously, a lot of patronage and corruption was involved, and there was a significant lack of controls of this licensing. So within only a couple of years, like many licenses were handed out for coal mining in different parts of the country, but especially in East Kalimantan and South Sumatra, which is still like the coal mining hotspot in Indonesia. Then in 2014, 2015, so shortly after, we had a short-term drop in international coal prices that also led to the bankruptcy of like smaller coal miners and a temporary crisis. Then what is also important, in 2015, the Jokowi government adopted the 35,000 megawatt program, which was partly also a reaction to the coal crisis, but then also went hand in hand with the president's plans to rise electricity production within the country and with the infrastructure agenda of then President Jokowi. So this plan provided for a major expansion of the coal-fired power generation in Indonesia. In the beginning, like the planning has been adjusted, but in the beginning in 2015, the government was planning to build 291 new coal power plants, and with a large share of them, so out of the 35,000 megawatt, 20,000 megawatt were to be produced by coal. So this was very important also for the Indonesian coal industry, because when the coal rush began in the beginning around 2011, Indonesia has become one of the largest coal producers and exporters. This is still the case, but while Indonesia in the beginning was exporting around 3/4 of the coal, now more than half of the coal is used domestically. And this is a result of national policies, like of this 35,000 megawatt program, but also of domestic market obligations, and especially also of favorable conditions like indirect and direct subsidies that were given to the coal industry and to coal-fired power generation. So the barriers to an Indonesian energy transition are actually closely linked to like the political economic structure in the country. I think someone also in the poll we had before already mentioned the oligarchic structure and patronage practices in Indonesia. So I think I cannot go into depths with this issue at the moment, but most people observing Indonesia know that there are a lot of like family business conglomerates that are controlling different sectors of the economy, and mining, and especially coal mining is one of them. So that means that there are actually like many powerful people as well as in business as also in politics, and sometimes the lines between them are quite blurred. which are themselves like in coal mining business. So that counts for the local level, but as well for the national level. So that's the case for parliamentarians, but also up to the ministerial level, and very important people that are actually also in charge of the energy transition and themselves. Like Luhut, for example, is like the prime example that has been always mentioned, that are themselves themselves investments in coal mining. A second facet of the political economy, apart from the oligarchic structure, are neoliberal and like good governance reforms that mainly refers to the decentralization reforms I mentioned before, which led to proliferation of coal mining licenses. And the third dimension of political economy that is important to look at are like state-led capitalist development structures, which, and this was also, I think, mentioned by one person before, PLN, which is the national electricity utility, has a very important position in guiding and steering the Indonesian electricity market. But also, like state-led capitalist development does not only mean the central position of these kind of state-owned enterprises like PLN, but then also, for example, Jokowi's infrastructure push that went hand in hand with the growth of coal-fired power plants. Yeah, and all these political economic structures in the country together led, like, first of all, to what I said before, the proliferation of coal mining licenses, but also allowed for vested interests to obstruct energy transitions in Indonesia, because, like I said before, coal entrepreneurs have occupied central positions in political parties, the parliament, and the government. Therefore, they are also able to impact regulations in the energy and electricity sector, and that led to very favorable conditions for coal, like many indirect and direct subsidies, for example, and a lot of barriers for renewables, especially for solar. We have to say there are a lot of regulatory barriers, especially like over the last years, there was a frequent change of the regulations, for example, and that also obstructed a further development of renewables, and especially solar, because geothermal and hydro projects are much more have much better conditions. There's also a geothermal regulation, for example. And I think the reason behind this is that, like, this is also that's appealing to the bigger companies, because it's a centralized energy system. It's one where you need a lot of investments in the first place, and potentially a field where you can make a lot of money with. Yeah, so that's on the regulatory basis. And but what also needs to be said, that like this situation and this like political economic background also like really shapes discourses about energy supply, electricity supply, and the energy transition. Like, for example, and this was also mentioned before, like the prioritization of economic growth, for example. And it also on the local level, it leads also to the protection of, for example, mining areas and coal power plant areas with means of violence and threat against local communities. Oops. Mhm. Yeah, I think I'm a bit over
Overtime,
so
yes.
I will, yeah,
Sorry.
okay. I will try to come to an end quickly. I just wanted to stress, like, when we speak about justice and injustice, obviously what first comes in mind is also like the materialization of these energy or electricity models on the local level, and it is here where we see like the most tremendous ecological and social impacts, actually. So I had some examples on like coal mining and also coal power plants, but I guess, I mean, most of you may know like about the about the negative impacts of mining industries, and this is just what has been replicated in coal mining and also in the construction of coal power plants in Indonesia. Then let me just briefly say something about like the concept of energy justice, like because I would say it's quite a complex concept, and generally in academia it is always defined as like a three-tenet approach. So the energy justice then is understood as distributional justice, which means like who gains and who loses from a specific energy arrangement. Justice as recognition is an important point that like involves, for example, recognizing different needs of different parts of the societies, especially of those people affected. Procedural justice refers to what has also been mentioned before, participation and a multi-stakeholder approach, which has oftentimes not been considered, or is oftentimes still not be considered in energy and electricity projects. And obviously, there are also further dimensions of justice that we should take into account, like, for example, restorative justice, cosmopolitan justice, epistemic injustices. I think this was also mentioned, like in one of the comments before, like diverse ways of knowing and diverse ways of understanding the world. But what we can see, like from all, I think nearly all studies on energy production, is that they reinforce existing injustices. And this counts for the national as well as for the global level, because, and that's just like a brief outlook, because we will hear more about this, I think, in a moment by Bima. When we think about just transition, we cannot only think about like the domestic scale and about, in this case, Indonesia, but obviously Indonesia and its energy system are also embedded in global inequalities. And for example, the German energy transition is also linked to the Indonesian one and to the reproduction of injustices. This is something what we call green extractivism. So, for example, the like one recently very well-known case is nickel mining in Indonesia, which is used for the production of electric vehicles in other parts of the world. So there we see reproductions of injustice in the transition, or in what is being called a green energy or energy transition. And I think the same also counts for these so-called partnerships like the JETPs, for example, that focus largely on large-scale infrastructures, and where we also saw unjust procedures between North and South, like who defines what projects will be selected, and also within Indonesia, like between different stakeholders. But yeah, I think I will hand over to Bima, who will tell you a little bit more on that. But what I would say, like as a last statement, what I like to say is that I think that like the energy transitions will be either just, or they will fail to be transitions at all, because otherwise large-scale infrastructures will be reproduced, and processes of unjust practices are being reproduced, for example, as with green extractivism. Thank you very much, and sorry for not keeping the time.
No worries. Thank you very much, Anna, for providing a historical overview and some first insights on barriers to justice. So now our second speaker is Bima Yudhistira. Bima holds a master's degree in finance from the University of Bradford, and he serves as the executive director of the Center of Economic and Law Studies, CELIUS. This is an Indonesia-based think tank focused on fiscal and climate justice. And he also received the British Academy Awards in 2024. And as an expert on energy transition, critical minerals governance, and restorative economy, he will now share insights into how just the Just Energy Transition Partnership truly is. So please go ahead, Bima.
Yeah, first of all, hi everyone, and thanks so much for this kind of opportunities, especially from the Watch Indonesia, Mbak Jantia, Sylvia, and also I heard a lot from Anna. So my task or my duty is just to continue with more details, I think, about the Indonesia conditions. So, is everyone sees my slide? Right? Okay.
Yes, not yet in presentation mode, but we see it.
Yep. Okay. So I divide into some parts. I think JETP, Anna already mentioned a lot about the JETP and also about the JETP comparisons because Indonesia not the only one. I think there is Vietnam, South Africa, but Senegal, I think Senegal still on progress. And then the potential implication, risks, challenges. I have some kind of examples of the geothermal project in Indonesia because many of the developed countries kind of institutions sees that Indonesia is huge potentials of the geothermal projects, ring of fires. But what is the risks of the geothermal project in Indonesia? Perhaps a little bit.
Mas Bima, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I think this is not the presentation you want to share. It's the other presentation you've sent me before.
Yeah, this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. And then the recommendations after that one. So yeah, maybe I add this kind of picture. So this is like videos of what happens in the Indonesia energy transitions currently. If you can see this, like the US leaving the Paris agreements, goodbye for the JETP, and then the Germany replaced the US as Indonesia JETP call it with the Japan. And each of the countries in the Indonesia Just Energy Transition Partnership, they have their own agenda. For instance, Germany may interest in the winds and also in the solar energy, but Japan they interest more on
Mas
the
Bima, I'm sorry
yeah.
to disturb you again, but what I see is here in Indonesian, they said 96 juta lapangan pekerja berpeluang tercipta. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just use this ones. Yeah, this is the correct one.
Penyerapan tenaga kerja sektoral?
Not this ones. So this is my presentations.
Okay, because you share us is penyerapan tenaga kerja sektoral.
I think that's a different file, sorry.
Yes, that's I want to
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I will send you this after the event. So yeah, but you see the video right here?
No, we don't see the video. We see another picture that we see another presentation what you talk about. That's why I asked you because the presentation you show us is not the same like what you're presenting.
Okay, let me go back again here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that looks good.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Totally wrong
Thank
file.
you.
Yep, you see the moving pictures, right?
Yes.
So this is the whole pictures of the Indonesia energy transitions currently. Okay, you know Donald Trump left the Paris agreements, and then Germany take the lead, and then the Middle East is coming. So we see this is like kind of a trilateral kind of a challenges because Indonesia in love joining the BRICS at the same time joining the OECD as a membership, but still on the progress. But with the joining with the BRICS, I think the China also bring the Middle East. As you can see here, is, the Qatari government handshakes Prabowo for the energy and then housing project. So we have newcomers in Indonesia energy transitions, not part of the JETP, but much bilateral agreements coming from the Middle East. So what unique here is Middle East money from the sovereign wealth funds and also from the investment company, but the contractors is coming from China. So why we call this like a trilateral kind of a cooperation happening right now beyond the JETP. And then as Anna mentions about the green extractivisms, I think this is relevant issues currently because there is a huge chaos, air pollutions, of course, labor unrest, a lot of the factory incidents happenings, but also on the same time, as Anna mentioned earlier about the coal. So the coal right now is shifting from the on-grid coal power plant owned by the SOE. They shift towards the critical minerals smelters. So we think that JETP not yet touch the captive coal power plant in the industrial park. So if I can conclude a short presentation, so this is the pictures currently happening. And then I will move with the more details. I think this one. So if we compare with the Indonesia, Vietnam, and the South Africa in terms of the energy technologies choose and also the locals communities, I think each of the JETP collaborations with this kind of a developing countries, one of the conclusion is either in Indonesia, Vietnam, or South Africa, they don't explicitly mention the local communities as the center of the energy transitions or indigenous community, because we think that this kind of plan is like developed countries driven and very, very small grants for the local communities, for the local governments to get money from this JETP. And then in the Indonesia context, for instance, they mentions the community role as a risk. So indigenous people mention in risk assessment criteria for just transition principle. So you get the money, you get the project, and then if the local communities is protesting that kind of the project, they can go to the JETP secretariats to complain. So what we imagine with the just energy transition is the local communities affected by the climate change, affected by the coal mining and coal power plants, but also affected by the energy transitions, renewable energy project. They should come first to the planning process, not in the end of the process, and then you can claim that as a just transitions. And we think that almost the same. So every countries like Indonesia and Vietnam, the proportions of the MDBs and also from the developed country, except the US just stopped in Indonesia and the other countries by 2025. I think the shares is a little bit different currently, but the proportion is still the same. While Germany take most of the lead, following by the Japan, and then from the MDBs. UK is a little bit smaller than the other countries. So the Indonesian government right now is in the transition process. So previously there is strong ministers, which is Anna mentioned as a Luhut. He also have conflict of interest because he also have shares of the coal mines close to the fossil energy business kind of things. And JETP in the previous president is under the Luhut leadership. But right now, under the Prabowo leaderships, the JETP is under the Ministry of Economic Coordinators. So one of the biggest problems of any of the energy transitions, financings, or collaboration is many of the partners, either private or countries, institutions, or MDBs, confused about the fast changing of the policy, fast changing of the key players who's handling the energy transitions. It seems like our current president is not so interesting about the energy transitions and more interesting in the energy securities. But actually, the energy transition itself is part of the energy security. As we can see right now, is the great momentum to tell the Indonesian government, for instance, that too much dependence on the oil, gas, and also coal is not good for our energy security. So we need to move fast for the renewable energy. And then there is this is I think later on maybe Mbak Janti will share to other participants about this kind of details. How many billion US dollars money already flow to the energy transition financing in Indonesia and the details. But actually, the problem is when the US committed to finance the JETP project in Indonesia before Donald Trump, I think the US is mostly used the MDB's guarantee rather than fresh money from the US account to the Indonesian government's or JETP account. So that's the only difference between the Germany, US, UK, and the other partners. And this is also one of the biggest problems. So if someone or many of the experts mentioned that there is a coal phase out in the context of the JETP, the answer perhaps yes. But in reality, one of the first project to be financed by the JETP, Cirebon 1, the coal retirement process currently is stalled. I would say a little bit challenging right now because at the beginnings, the Indonesian government thinks that yes, we can do this kind of the coal-fired power plant phase out because it's owned by the private sectors. But in the process, the government thinks that I think changing of the transmissions, changing of the renewable energy replacements from this kind of the coal power plant, I think it's also related to the legal and also financial challenge for Indonesian government. But it seems like very ridiculous. Like nobody in the Indonesian government take the risk because they're afraid retiring the Cirebon 1 power plant can lead them to the jail. So any kind of the legals and financial constraint used by the Indonesian government to delay this kind of the retirement project. And then the JETP, all the energy transitions in Indonesia fail to see that there is a huge increase of the coal demand from the critical minerals because we see that compared with the PLN on-grid coal power plant versus the critical captive coal power plants, the number is higher. So we need to handle all of them, but the JETP only care about the PLN and IPP itself, not yet touch the captive coal power plant. Because if we only focusing on the retiring the PLN and also IPP independent power producer power plant, I think the number of the coal productions for domestic use still increase in a couple of futures, because the captive coal power plant right now is increased dramatically. And then as Anna mentions also about the health costs, Celios and also CREA, and I think multiple times tells the Indonesian governments that the health costs for the captive coal power plants is not yet mentioned in any kind of the government documents to say that we need to limit the number of the power plant in industrial park because who's gonna pay for this kind of the health costs? So if the government pay for this health cost with the health insurance, public health insurance, like BPJS Kesehatan, I think the burden to the fiscal is so high. So we use also the language of the health, but I don't think right now the governments hear about the health issues. They more hear about the economic growth, about the energy securities, and also nickel. As long as for the EV, that's okay. If there is a health cost and also air pollutions damaging the local community, so that kind of the narrative that we often hear from the government. And then so there is many of the false solutions happen right now. One of them is okay, let's build many of the coal power plants on grid and also off grid, as long there is a CCS or CCUS. So this kind of the unproven technologies, I think we also talk with the government's agency to say that be careful because Indonesia ring of fire, there is a risk if we build the power plant using the captive coal, using the CCS. And also the cost is very, very expensive. So it can delay and also distract resources from the renewable energy project. And about the just, I think the just side is, this is the pictures of local indigenous community in Flores in the eastern part of Indonesia, who get arrested because they're protesting the KfW, the Germany Development Bank, and also the PLN, Indonesia Electricity Companies, because they say that the geothermals is endanger the local communities, and the location of geothermal is so close with the housing owned by the local communities. And many of the geothermal projects in Indonesia have the same fate, because the assessment, the planning itself since the beginnings is like a very, 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 very rush, very, very unparticipative to the local community. And the government always said that Geothermal is actually very green energy and very just energy. And if someone from the local community, from the NGO protesting the geothermal, it is because the communication issues. So they always think that the communications issues, not the technicals, not the participations since the beginning, selections of technology, but it's just communication issues. And then this one is one of the drawbacks in terms of the financings. But I totally agree with Anna mentioned earlier about the high costs and developed countries driven technology they choose. But the Indonesian community may need different kind of energy. They have like a community-based renewable energy initiative. So JETP didn't touch that kind of the initiative. JETP is more like a high cost energy and see that the community renewable energy is not yet prepared for that one. So that's kind of the paradigm that we think that we need to shift if we want to talk about the energy transitions. The community should be the central. The energy is not only owned by the governments, owned by the big corporations, but energy should be the rights of every community. Okay, I will set. Okay, yep. This is the last one, I think. So the big question is the community-based renewable energy possible in Indonesia? And what is the challenges? And if so possible, how many job creations, how many GDP, if we use that kind of the governments and also develop countries narrative. So community-based renewable energy, based on our calculations and modeling things, that it's very, very possible to bring more jobs, more equal, and also more opportunity, not only for the community itself, but for the small business, small medium enterprise that get benefit from this kind of local community initiative of renewable energy. I think that's from my presentation, Sylvia. Sorry if I talk too much. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thank you. So thank you very much, Bima. So let's continue with our third presentation. Our final speaker is Ashraf Biri. Ashraf holds a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's degree in environmental science from the University of Indonesia. And he previously worked as a global project leader and campaign coordinator for Greenpeace. And since 2018, he's been serving as program director at Trend Asia, which is an independent civil society organization that promotes energy transformation and sustainable development across Asia. And as an expert in community-led energy transition and environmental justice, he will now present case studies which compare large-scale energy projects like the one in Flourish that Bima already mentioned with citizen-led energy initiatives. So please go ahead, Ashraf.
Thank you, Sylvia, and hello, everyone. Good to meet you all. I would like to share a presentation. Hopefully, can you see this right now? Okay.
Yes, perfect.
So I'm continuing Bima actually. So Bima already present to you the benefit of community-based renewable energy, and it is so promising actually. But I would like to try, of course, to share this with you on what might hinder those to be realized. So I've been asked to share with you energy decentralization and local energy initiatives. So I would like to start from this actually, energy transition, but where are we transitioning? I would like to use this from elements of actually green economy. We can use that at least for now, but we could also discuss another form of economy that is right now in contestation, in debate all over the world, and I'm happy with it. But there is three big elements: decarbonization, natural resources efficiency, and decentralization or democratization. So decarbonization talking about, well, technological change, decoupling economic growth from carbon emission, greenhouse gases. And I believe this is where we are right now, not only in Indonesia, but globally. But there is two important elements. that we need to, how do you say, boost if we would like to realize a just energy transition. Of course, there are many other elements, but I would like to start working from this. So natural resources efficiency, decoupling economic growth from material use. It speaks 3R, reduce, reuse, recycle, and I believe right now, not only Indonesia, all over the world, we are trapped in the last R, which is recycle. And then it speaks also about circular economy, of course, in contrast with linear economy, where the basic assumption is there is no limits in terms of resources and in terms of accumulating capacity of the earth to receive waste or pollution or emission from human activity. And right now, I see this in Indonesia it is very hard to step up to this second element. I believe Anna already also touched on that, on why it is so hard. And the third element might be the answer then, decentralization or democratization. It talks about localization of production, consumption, and of course, the very important topic, bottom-up approach. And I would like to share this with you. It's UNEP's actually report, bend the trend. So material use is increasing, ever increasing, either biomass, non-metallic minerals, fossil fuels, or metals. And this is on the interface, but what's on background is of course destruction, exploitation, eviction of people, pollution, you name it, all over the extraction site, including in Indonesia, either in minerals, either in forests, either in geothermal, like what Bima already shared earlier. And the picture on the right is the conceptualization from UNEP's of where we should be heading. But this is the important topic of resource use right now. And in terms of key message, I would like to share this also with you. Although, of course, you could also visiting UNEP's page later on. Increasing resource use, main driver of planetary crisis, material use ever increasing, and all of that. But high-income countries use 6 times more material per capita and are responsible for 10 times more climate impact per capita than low-income countries. That's on the international level, but of course, at the same time in Indonesia, it's also happened in terms of rich segment with poor segment. So inequalities happen both, I believe, international level, but also in national level. And other key messages, but I would like to put a highlight on those 2 messages. So what happened in Indonesia? Indonesia's resources are widely exploited, including in the name of energy transition, but Indonesia's renewable energy achievement are very low. So this is one portrait of how injustice happened. Also, I will say that it is also happen in terms of national level or inter geography level. But Indonesia's original renewable energy mix is 23% in 2025. This is original target. Currently, it has only reached 14 to 15%. So it is anomaly for me. Indonesia's resource is already widely exploited, but in terms of energy mix achievement is still very low. Yes, it is, increase in terms of target in 2030 through JETP or through new Indonesia's renewable energy regulation or energy regulation. But of course, we could also understand the postpone or delay of that target could also, become a factor of lock-in into fossils or extractivism in Indonesia at the same time. So this is the portrait from forests. If we took forest as a variable, there are 4 commodities or license, but deforestation from forest utilization license (PBPH) is, as you may see in the left top of the screen, is ever increasing, with Kalimantan contribute the widest deforestation. And why forests? Why we highlight forests? Because as of now, the narrative of bioenergy, especially wood-based bioenergy, biomass, is becoming, how do you say, a new area for the oligarchy to play to extend their concession. And then in terms of mining, nickel mining is also increasing right now in terms of deforestation, especially in Sulawesi or eastern part of Indonesia, as well as for bauxite. The trend is also increasing, but ironically, in terms of coal mining, is also ever increasing. That's the portrait of how Indonesia's natural resource is widely exploited. Good news that the new coal power plant or proposed coal power plant is decreasing, and Bima already said that how to close them right now. The operating one is also is becoming a problem right now, and also there is still going to be new coal power plant, including for captive coal power captive for especially for smelter, nickel processing. But I would like to highlight this in terms of production and exportation of coal from Indonesia. So Q1 2025, 72% from productions, and it's, how do you say, it's persistent. What I would like to say that most of the exploited coal production is going outside Indonesia, and that's true also for nickel. That's true also for forests, for woods, and that's the case. It's the, how do you say, the extractivism at its best, actually. And of course, this is the interface, but in the background, we could say that very small value added for communities across factor of production also. So in terms of decentralization, there is this structural barrier as well. Also, Anna already said that yes, there is decentralization once in 1998, but the trend is centralization again back then in 2020 with omnibus job creation law, which not creating job at all actually as of now, and there are many unemployment right now in Indonesia. But what I would like to highlight is that, for instance, KEN, National Energy Policy, is being developed by this Energy Council, National Energy Council. There is president there, vice president, ministries, and there should be stakeholders there. And up until then, the following up will be about electricity plan, and then RUKD is the regional one, and then become energy planning, till national, and then the regional one, RUED. But what I would like to highlight is that RUEN, RUKN, RUPTL, Electricity Business Plan, is being centralized, especially in these two institutions, Ministry of Energy and Natural Resource, and then National Electricity Company. There is this problem of why it is being centralized, or how it is being centralized. I'm sorry. The impact of the centralization of it is especially low energy mix of renewable energy in Indonesia because of those monopolies from central government. Those impacting either energy policy will be or issue will be strategic for regional government or no. And the answer is no, but we could link it with the centralization of power to decide where energy of Indonesia will be. So that's the first problem. But the second problem, for instance, there is this target from KEN or from National Energy Policy, and then follow up by RUEN, National Energy Plan. But there is this technical problem in terms of translating it into become regional or local energy regulation. So what I would like to say is that yes, decentralization with current configuration is becoming a problem for Indonesia, including corruption, decentralization of corruption. But I would like to ask the question as well: who is actually not working their homework actually? And my answer is that central government is not doing their homework. That's why. So it reflected in terms of this technical capacity to translate RUEN or national energy policy, but at the same time the consequences is that the energy policy is not being translated into development plan, especially in the how do you say in region, and the further consequence that it won't be financed by state budget, regional state budget. So concentration of power and then technicalities is becoming how do you say becoming problem for renewable energy. And of course, as you may imagine, in terms of national energy policy, in terms of electricity business plan, which is centralized by Energy and Mineral Resource Ministry and PLN, State on Electricity PLN, means the rampant crony capitalism is there. Of course, we know that there is problem. Of course, with vested interest, we know who is the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. This is the one who has also business in energy. But that's the problem in terms of Indonesia regulation right now. So you might imagine if local communities initiative couldn't be scaled up, couldn't be financed by public finance, as well as is not, how do you say, is not being protected by regulation. So local energy initiatives, I would like to elaborate more on Bima's last presentation. There are right now 6,000 villages, more than 6,000 villages, and 1.3 million households that in Indonesia that have now received access to electricity from PLN. But at the same time, there is off-grid electricity, more than 1.2 million households. But at the same time, we have high potency in terms of small hydro, solar, wind, benefit and value added for community-based renewable energy. But we cannot also afford to forget about energy consumption, which is concentrated in big cities, and for industry, we need to think also about that. But Trend Asia already create a documentation. As of now, we are trying to collaborate with communities as well to develop. But we document several initiatives of local community, micro hydro in Riau province, and in West Java, in Central Java. There is also Omset Pintar, hybrid solar wind in Central Java. And then the application of renewable energy in West Nusa Tenggara, or resource efficiency actually in West Nusa Tenggara. But what I would like to share is that most of them are initiated by community, helped by NGOs, either NGOs or universities, and it is really coming from bottom up and enabled by democracy actually, because the community is having a discussion and then trying to develop their how do you say their technical capacity as well. They are dividing roles in terms of maintaining this community-based renewable energy, and not only that, but they are also using this to create a value added for their local economy as well. And one important feature, I guess, in terms of this local initiative is that it is based on needs, not based on centralized targets of electricity. So these are local energy initiatives, but I would like to close this through Sherry Unstrained ladder of public participation. Non-participation, I believe, is still happen in Indonesia. Degrees of tokenism as well. And I believe that the portrait of renewable energy that Trend Asia already portrayed could speak in terms of citizens' power, where control of renewable energy is being put in the hand of citizens, or at the example of where communities working together with universities, with NGOs, sometimes with local government. Partnership is also things that needs to be, how do you say, targeted in terms of renewable energy. But I believe it's also true with this, how do you say, global partnership. How is it possible that it is decentralized from countries to countries, but in terms of inside countries, I believe it is also important to fight for decentralization to the best scenario of ladder of public participation. That would be all from me. This is reading and viewings. You could go to Trend Asia YouTube or Trend Asia website for these two, but you could of course browse more. But that would be my presentation for now. Back to Sylvia.
Thank you very much. And also thanks again to all of our three speakers for their presentations. Now we've actually got a pretty good overview on where Indonesia currently stands and what are barriers in a just energy transition. And so with that, we'll now transition to our question and answering session. So just feel free to raise your hand, or if you prefer, you can also put questions in the chat. And in the meantime, while first questions are popping in, I may start with a question. So we learned that there's not enough participation of local communities in the JETP planning and implementation. So maybe to all speakers, what do you think, what could we do about it, and where do you see the responsibilities to act? Who of you would prefer to answer?
I would like to start if I may,
Great.
Sylvia, to answer your
Perfect, yes.
question. I believe the appreciation of time is needed. You know, it tends to be, how do you say, in a rush. In terms of public participation as well, you know, governments and corporation tends to, you know, would like to do it as fast as possible, but appreciation of time. I mean, and of course, at the same time, we need also to consider, or not to consider, but to really understand what community is needed, actual need, what is actual need of community, or at the same time, we could radicalize it, decentralize, delegate it to the community or to local government, where it's easier for local government to, you know, to control, because as you may imagine, in archipelagic nation of Indonesia, it is very costly for them to go to Jakarta, right? Either to propose cooperation or either to protest even, and that's what is current government, not current government, previous government and current government is centralizing in Jakarta. So it is very hard for community to control, and I think in terms of JETP, to really consider that, you know, to not really, you know, appreciate the time. It is, we need time. I mean, community needs time, or at the same time synchronize to pace of communities. To be my answer.
Thank you. I think, Anna, you want to add to it?
Yeah, I could add a little bit to it. I agree with everything Ashok just said. I would say like the fundamental problem with the JETP is that it actually lacks any definition of justice, or that it's a very superficial definition of justice. And it's also very different between the different JETP implementation plans. So like, for example, Vietnam, justice is nearly not mentioned in the plan. In Indonesia, the plan refers to this energy trilemma, which is just like, seems to be just like dropping some concepts. In South Africa, it's a bit more comprehensive. It refers to this three tenets approach that I mentioned. But yeah, so there's no common understanding of justice, and that is something we would expect to be the starting point for a just transition plan, right? So that's something that's missing. I've heard from the German side that, like, for them, this is also like a little bit, or kind of like a question of ownership of the recipient countries. But nevertheless, I think that there needs to be a common understanding developed. But I would also see this as a process that requires a little bit more of time, and that does not only involve like Indonesian politicians, but also really those people that are affected. So potentially you would first like need a mapping of like who could you actually involve in this process, and what are the needs those people have. And then, I mean, yeah, justice is a very complex issue, right? As we've heard. And yeah, then I mean another dimension is justice between the partners here. So I think there's also obviously it's not a partnership of equals in that sense either. So there's also the question like then who defines what to do, and yeah, just as an add-on.
Thank you. Bima?
Yeah, I just want to add that the government thinks that if we rush to the energy transitions, it will harm to economic. So the big question is the just energy transitions transform the economy, or it just like a project far away from economic transformations? There may be like a energy transition in some part, but we think that many of the large corporations that want to engage either in JETP or directly engage with the SOE or the government's agency, they have their own agenda to secure the resources. So is the nickel's boom in Indonesia is part of the energy transition? So we doubt about that kind of things. So what we want is like, okay, we have limited time, but also things about the economic transformations, political transformations, not only project by project. I think I just want to add that kind of point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Niklas, do you want to continue with your question?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much. First of all, sorry for being late. And second of all, thank you for the presenters for their great inputs. Just really quickly about my background. I work for Survive International. We are the movement on indigenous people's rights, and we've been engaged in Indonesia, specifically in the case of the so-called Hongana Manyawa in Halmahera, and there was supposed to be a big nickel refinery which have intensified the nickel mining on this island, and we have campaigned against that, just for my background. I have one question for Anna, and you mentioned that when these concessions for the coal mines were given out, it was a bit of a shady process, if I understood you correctly, and I would be interested in if there's any movements or social ways these giving of mining concessions, has been challenged. The reason I'm asking is that we are always looking for positive examples of community-led resistance, and I was wondering if there might be something where the nickel mining people might learn something from, or the people opposing the nickel mining, to be more precise. The second question is for Bima. You've mentioned, I hope I'm saying this right, you mentioned a number of health costs of $2.6 billion if the nickel industry proceeds the way they do. I think that's a very important number, and something which should be more on the forefront, because it kind of shows that this whole calculation for the people of Indonesia is quite problematic. So I was actually wondering where that number came from and what it constitutes. And I'm coming to an end. The third question is for Ashof, and you had in your presentation towards the end a graph showing how much of the energy need is for industry and how much is for the general population, if I understood it correctly. And I found that very interesting, because sometimes if you talk to people in Indonesia, especially government agencies, they often argue that this increase in coal power plants is given that there's increased need of the population for energy. But my feeling often is that a majority of this additional energy need is going towards industrial smelting, refining, mining. And this argument, I'm wondering if it's actually true, if the Indonesian energy need for the general population is actually increasing as much as the coal mining is being built up. Sorry for all the long questions. Thank you so much in advance.
Shall I answer?
maybe
Okay.
Yes,
concerning the coal mining concessions, there has been actually even a process that involved several NGOs and the Indonesian Corruption Eradication Commission. It was called Clean and Clear. So they checked many of the licenses back then. Some of them also got revoked at the end of the process, but then some of them were issued again. So it was, I would say, a semi-successful process. But yeah, so there has, I think I cannot explain in length now, but there has been this process, and there are also like several NGOs, especially Vali, I think, has done a lot of work with local communities, and Jatam as well, where they supported communities with civil lawsuits. Oftentimes, for example, based on the environmental impact assessment, AMDAL in Bahasa. Yeah, so these were also partly successful cases. Sometimes they have been revoked, and then a new, like this was, for example, in Cirebon, like one of the co-power plants. They had such a process. Then I think first they won and the environmental license got revoked, and then a new one was issued. So there are these, yeah, there are these attempts to do something against it, especially based on legal measures, and partly successful, I would say. But anyone feel free to add to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I will follow up with Nicholas' questions. So if you want to see the detailed methodologies, I attach the link of our report. But at the beginning, we think that we need to talk beyond the carbon emission reductions. So why we came up with the health impact, because we think that perhaps the governments, international agencies, countries that are also involving in the JETP, but beyond the JETP, like China, Middle East, that coming after that, thinks that what downstreaming process in Indonesia is so go wrong. So we calculate the PM 2.5, NOx, and the others dangerous hazard or pollutants for the air pollutions only. So we gather the data from the smelters and also the captive coal power plants on that industrial park in the three provinces in North Maluku, and also in the Sulawesi, in the central Sulawesi, and also southeast Sulawesi. So we get that kind of the data, and then we formulate the health modeling impact for up to, I think, 20 years. So with that kind of the data, we talk with the Indonesian governments. We hope that the one that speaks about the end of the coal-fired power plants and the installment of the renewable energy is not only coming from the energy ministry, not only coming from the economic ministry, but also coming from the health ministry. So that kind of our approach. So we think that if the governments let the companies install new captive coal power plant, it will be damaging the fiscal, the deficit of the public insurance claim, which is right now is one of the highest burdens to our fiscal space, because the air pollution is not yet calculated and then put that into the future claim. I think that's our approach, Nicholas. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I would like to follow up in terms of Nicholas' question, whether coal extraction is for people, right, Nicholas, if I'm not mistaken. So let's start from this. More than 70% are for outside Indonesia, right? And that's a huge issue. If you like to say reduce emission from Indonesia, I mean from everywhere. I believe that wherever the coal burns, it's also for the planet, right? I mean, so that could also be one of the intervention in terms of reducing emission. And it's how do you say, it's not being properly addressed as of now in terms of coal mining. And if we consider the figure of 72% or more than 70% is coming outside Indonesia, which is true for nickel, which is true for Indonesia's forest, which is true for Indonesia's palm oil, etc., etc. So that what I'm saying is that there is, of course, needs to be intervention in terms of demand. And in terms of nickel, I believe the consumption final product one is concentrated in Europe, in US, and in China. So that's also need to be considered, because at the same time, what happens in Indonesia is that linear economic model is still persistent. Like there is no limits, and concretely, no limits is we could see that from small islands, which is prohibited, should be prohibited by law in Indonesia to be exploited, including for nickel, but it is exploited in 35 islands at least right now. Small island, less than 2,000 kilometers in terms of area, it is being, how do you say, mined, it is being extracted or exploited. So back to your question, of course, there is increase in terms of energy consumption from household, but at the same time, in terms of if we take a look at Piketty, he did this inequality research, right, including in terms of emissions. So we could really see that energy is being, how do you say, concentrated in top 1% or 10% of communities, including in terms of emission, if we take a look at their investment portfolios. And we talk about industry then, where in Indonesia, in terms of, how do you say, proper or apa upah layak tuh Mas Bima, decent wages is still very far as well. So we should take a look at not only energy, but as well as how the transformation or the transformation of resource, including for energy, the value added of it is being, how do you say, is being concentrated. It's not on labors, it's not for local community for sure. You already also mentioned Ohangana Manyawa. That's the for me the manifestation of there is no limit assumption of economy right now in Indonesia. So we have layered problem, of course, in terms of how do Indonesia could using its resource in terms of its own need, going to be, we need good government. We need clean government for sure. But at the same time, I really think that we need also international cooperation and also at the topic of demand, the demand for final products of raw resource or raw material resource. That'll be from my end, Nicholas. Hope it answered.
Thank you so much. That answered all my questions. I appreciate it.
Perfect. I think, Catherine, you had been raising your hand before. You're muted still.
Yeah, thank you to giving me the chance to speak. Let me introduce myself. I'm Catherine from JETP Secretariat Indonesia. So because I think everyone is like talking about the JETP, I think I should give a little bit I want to speak a little bit, but actually all of the input, I think it's really I really appreciate all of the input. I think with especially with Mas Bima that I never been met. I think we should have a chit chat in Jakarta to stick with, and then because all of the input will be really good for the CIPP development. So in terms, I'm the Just Transition Working Group co-lead for the JETP Secretariat. So I'm more focusing on the Just Transition itself. So I just updated that we have already developed the Just Transition framework in our CIPP. It is Comprehensive Investment Plan 2023. So, and then the local customary or local people communities and customary communities is one become of our standard 3 that we are focusing on the local communities, and then we are also like try to see what are the risks from the impact of the project itself, and then we try to make a mitigation plan to protect them. So I think we are in the same phase that we also consider, and then we are also focused on the communities itself. And then in our CIPP 2025, I think we are trying to develop the Just Transition Framework operationalization itself. So later on when it is published, you can see in our CIPP that we are we are put there to do the stakeholder mapping and engagement in the first step of in the beginning of the project itself. And then we are also already emphasized to do the community involvement that we should start from the beginning. And then we are also develop standard 9 study in this CIPP. So we are try to develop our economic diversification and transformation itself. So hopefully all of the one that we are doing in our CIPP, and we also try to implement it in all of the projects that under JETP, because this is a progress, and then the transition also in the progress. I think all of your input will be support us, and then let's work together to make the more just transition, just energy transition. I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Yes, Anna, you want to reply to it, I think.
No, I actually have some questions to Catherine, as you already thanks for giving us
Yes, please.
an insight in the new CIPP development. I wanted to ask, well, first of all, do you already know when the new CIPP will be published? Is there already like a rough date? Then I wanted to ask about the community involvement you mentioned. Will there be also like community-driven projects? Because in the first CIPP, it was only mentioned, we will do some research on whether community-driven projects could be included. So if you already know, that would be interesting to know whether in the new version that will be considered as projects. And then I also wanted to ask about the sources, because the first CIPP was very much focusing on hydro and geothermal energy, and there was nearly no solar energy, or very, very few. Will there also be like a shift in like to more solar, wind, or like generally small scale electricity production? That would be great to know if you can already tell us. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anna, for the questions. So actually, for our CIPP, we'll be launching, I don't know, probably around September, because we are starting to make the modeling with the result of the RUPTL that just launching, I think, last 2 weeks, or yeah, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, Mas Bima and Mas Asof, we are just launching our RUPTL. So it will be all of the project in JETP also will be aligned with the RUPTL, because the previous one, it is only using the draft of RUPTL, but currently, because the RUPTL already published, so we will follow that one, and then the modeling of the technical achievement, that one also will be aligned with the RUPTL, that one. For the project itself, I think yeah, mostly the same as the RUPTL, so we are following that. But currently in our draft of CIPP, we are there's 6 of the focusing area. It is like 6 focusing area. Previously, it's only 5, but currently the energy efficiency is become one of the additional of the focusing area. That's one. For the community project itself, I think yeah, we are directly, we are not going to that one. Not starting that one, but I should check if there's some project in that part. That one, because it is under financing. Yeah, thank you. Hopefully, it's answering your question.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, then let's continue with Bima.
Yeah, thanks so much, and hi, nice to meet you, Catherine. Because since 2023, we talk a lot with Paul Butar-Butar, is the head secretariat of the JETP, and just I think 2 weeks ago we've met in one forum in the university with the head of JETP Secretariat. So since the beginning of the first CIPP 2023, the Indonesia think tank and the CSO outside the working group of the JETP. So we send kind of a document like public consultations. So one of the demand is first how the local communities that affected by the JETP project should be part of the working groups. So that kind of the demands, perhaps right now not yet met, but perhaps in the revisions or the second edition of the CIPP will be met, that kind of the demand, because it's very important that we think that the working groups consists of the local governments, can be consist of the local communities. I think that's very important. So since the beginning, since the planning, the local community, local governments understands the implication of the JETP. The second demand is about the direct access to the grants, because we understand that Indonesia is one of the lowest portions of the grants compared with the other, like a South Africa JETP, if I'm not mistaken. So with this very, very small grants, we hope that's not going only for the studies or consultations or kind of the many things that like technicalities of the JETP project preparations, but also how the local communities like Hongawa Manyawa, because in Maluku, for instance, they have their own demand for the renewable energies that based on the local community needs. So how that kind of the indigenous community, especially in small island, can access directly to the JETP money. So that's not yet met, and hopefully with the revision of the CIPP, that kind of the demand can be accomplished. Hopefully, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mas Bima, for the input for that one for the direct grant. But as you already know that the grant is very small, and then also mostly the JETP project is a loan. So you should know that yeah, you already know that we might be like yeah, more or that we are more focusing in like in the project itself currently. But while doing the project, we should consider also the community. But all your input I already put in here, and then we can put because we are now like actually I already conduct one meeting with the CSO, one FGD with CSO to embed all of the input from the CSO for our current new CIPP. That one I think I already sent to Sirius or not, I forgot. But I already noted that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe one last question from my side. On the role of the global north, actually. So what do you think, how could the global north contribute better to a just energy transition in Indonesia, and especially without imposing any new colonial dynamics, for example? Any volunteer in answering?
Mas Bima, I guess, could start economically speaking first.
Yeah, so that's the typical of Indonesians, very humble. So yeah, I just want to start first, and Asaf and Anna maybe later on. So first of all, I think how this kind of the collaborations developing countries. I think it based on the country needs, especially the local community needs. So I think one of the major narrative is how the communities can benefit. The marginalized community can benefit. Women can benefit, especially women, because I think this is like a gender bias when talking about the energy transitions. All of the terms is very, very technical. We need engineers. And then one of the obstacles in Indonesia is not many women in STEM, for instance. So that's kind of a homework, how to ensure that, of course, the grant is so small right now. So how to ensure that it can be like more inclusive kind of energy narrative, and also energy project involving a lot of the women in the process itself. because we already know that the electricity is male-dominated sectors. So number two, I think more grants, less loan, and be transparent to all of the project involving in the grants, and also make very, very easy the grant making process. So once again, the local communities, women in the local community can access that grants easily. The third ones, if they give grants to the local community, ensuring that the developed country should have like a multi-years or very, very long-term kind of a program. So it's not like a hit and run grants. So, okay, the local community need this one, but only this years. So next years, it depends on the financings and so on and so on. So that's very important. The other things, I think, ensuring that the developed country should pay the historical climate debt to the developing country. It means that the developed country like Germany don't ever think to sell their technologies because perhaps there is a difficulty to absorb in the other market, and they think that through JETP, for instance, they can sell a wind turbine, solar PV, and so on. So we want to develop more domestic capacities, productions for any components of the energies, renewables, energies, transmissions, smart grid, and so on, so it can benefit more to the local economy. I think I will stop that and give to Asaf and Anna, I think.
Thank you.
Me, Sylvia?
Yes.
Yeah, to follow up on Bima, I think to enable really resource use efficiency, natural resource efficiency use, and then to enable decentralization as well. I know it's going to be hard from your end, either how do you say, either it is a push or pull factors. But for instance, if we take a look at nickel mining or transition minerals, there are many, how do you say, there are many, it's even very basic issue. Actually, it's also about law enforcement issue. We have regulations in terms of conflict of interest. We have regulation in terms of vested interest. We have regulation in terms of politically exposed persons. We have also at the same time regulation in terms of protecting small islands. We have regulation in terms of protecting forests. We have protection. We have regulation. We have many regulations, but the one of the basic problem is law enforcement. So really to be, how do you say, really careful in terms of projects, both in terms of vested interest and in terms of environmental limits. And I think by enabling natural resource use efficiency, by enabling decentralization, let's also speak for an appeal to, varying the development actors. It's not only government and corporations. It should be community groups. It should be SMEs as well. So to enable that, to enable resource use efficiency, and in terms of enabling decentralization in Indonesia, I think it's going to be very, very important. And I would like to also make a underscore what Bima already said, factor in historical climate responsibility as well. For instance, Indonesia has a plan to build giant seawall right now across Java, so it's very, very long. But you can imagine, right, how many mountains, lime mountains will be exploited, and how systematically speaking it will affect water, affect food in the future. So historical responsibility is very important, as well as in terms of closure of coal power plant. And I believe we speak to another G7 countries in terms of this, to Korea, to Japan, but as well as to international financial institutions, where maybe Germany also has some voice. That is looking in our future as well. So I think that would be, how do you say, in terms of what North could help countries like Indonesia going forward. Thank you, Sylvia.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree to both what you said, Bima and Ashaf, and I can only add maybe two more things. I think, like generally, obviously, as we have these interdependencies between our energy transition and like externalities and extractivism in Indonesia, our task would also be to like rethink our type of energy transition. I mean, particularly, for example, in the transport sector, where everything is still so much focusing on cars and like the German mobility transition is like, okay, we do everything as before, but we just use electric cars. So we could also, I mean, our task is to envision a different form of transition that is maybe also less dependent on or leading to less extractivism in other parts of the world. So I think that's one thing. And the other one is, I think, well, so far there has not been that much impact yet, but there are also these due diligence acts. There's a German due diligence act that the current government wants to revoke, as our current chancellor said already during the election campaigns. And there's a European due diligence act. So we should make sure that the due diligence acts become stronger and also like touch upon like the entire supply chain, which is difficult to do, but I think it's worth an attempt. Yes. That are my two additions to that question. And obviously like support these like small scale initiatives that Ashov mentioned. Actually, I was interested in learning more about them, but maybe I will ask you in another another time separately. But
As
that
do
was
I, Anna.
very
I mean,
interesting.
as do I. We need to learn from them, actually, all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Bima, you want to add to it?
Yeah, just half minutes. First, don't finance the false solutions. That's we need to have like a strict requirements which kind of the technology. So we hope that JETP, for instance, can have their own voice to the Indonesian government, to the developed country, to say that if you want to help Indonesia energy transitions, do this and then stop doing like what CCS, CCUS, kind of the technology that delay financing to the real renewable energy that Indonesians community really needs. And right now, the nuclear is a boom again right now. So the nuclear is, we call this like a past histories back in 1960, something like that. And the dream right now, because of the energy security issue, is pop up again. I think JETP should have a strong statement that no nuclear, we don't need nuclears, I think. And the other things is Germany, as a colleague of the JETP, hopefully can give a lesson learned how to coal phase out in the very, very participative and inclusive way, and also to bring more economic development after the coal phase out. I think that's the European countries can do that. And the last, very, very last one, this one is I totally agree with the Anna, because when the EU Commission, EU Parliament discussing about the EU battery regulations, EU due diligence, and so on, they don't invite Indonesia CSO to discuss that in the EU Parliament. But your regulations in the EU is impacting all the producer countries. That's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I don't see any further questions, so I would say let's close the webinar. Before we close, let me just briefly summarize a few key points. I can't summarize everything that we've mentioned here, but just on the meta level, so we've seen that Indonesia's energy transition is not only an economic challenge, but it's also a societal and an environmental one. And if you remember at the beginning of the webinar, we had asked you about the challenges for a just energy transition in Indonesia and how that could be promoted. We've now learned about the negative impact that, for example, also large-scale energy infrastructure projects and mining can have. For example, the health costs that Bima mentioned. We have also discussed major obstacles regarding the justness of the Just Energy Transition Partnership that is currently implemented. So, for example, that the term justness is not sufficiently defined yet. There's not sufficient involvement of the civil society and of local communities in the planning and in the implementation of projects. And that currently high impact technologies like large hydro, geothermal, nuclear are prioritized. while small-scale off-grid civil energy projects are neglected. Despite these could actually reduce environmental damage and social disruption, and also enable energy supply for remote areas in Indonesia. And finally, I mean, we've also taken a bit of time to discuss the role of the global north and developed, heard about some ideas what could be improved in the cooperation between the global north and the global south. So with that, just brief summary, I would like to once again thank our speaker and also all of our participants for the active participation, for the interest to come here. We invite you to stay connected with the topic through the Watch Indonesia website, and there's also a newsletter connected to that. In a minute, you can find the link to the website in the chat. And also in the coming months, there will be further content, for example, a podcast, flyers, and there's also additional informational events, such as one focusing on the climate lawsuit of the Indonesian island Pari against the cement company Holcim. And before everyone leaves, to help us improve our future events, it would be great if you could provide some brief feedback. So there will also be a short evaluation poll via Mentimeter in the chat in a minute. And it's just a few questions, so we just ask you to take a moment to answer the questions before leaving the Zoom room. And with that, we're closing. I'd like to wish you a pleasant day or evening, depending on the location where you're joining from. And we look forward to seeing you on one of our next events. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, Janti,
Thank you, Anna, Sylvia.
Emma.
Emma.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.